I'm recording. Here we go. All right, so what remains in this class? We have today and Thursday. Today, I'm going to show you sort of not very satisfying update, but at least I will have shown you all of the major database interactions. Major database interactions are insert, update, delete, and select. And so after today, I can say that we've seen them all. Then we will, so we've seen everything we need to see. We'll see what I come up with for Thursday. And then next week, I promise you, it's just time to work on your project. And then we have the third test in the finals week. So we know what the project involves. That was posted, project due May 6th. That was posted some time ago. And it's basically one of these SQL Alchemy databases with a number of entities, at least both kinds of relationships, at least one one-to-many and one many-to-many relationship. Define the database in SQL Alchemy, so define the classes and correspond to the tables. Import some data and do various routes that I've asked you for. So that will also be good practice for the third test because that's what the third test is on. So the third, I gave you a homework and a lab. And I think the homework is a scenario where I say, here's the database I want you to define. And I give you sort of nothing, you define it from scratch. At least I don't give you any files. If you want to use some of your files you've already used for lab, that's perfectly fine. But that's what half the test will be like. Test 3, half the test will be, I will give you some scenario and some data, and you will define the database, put the data in there, do some querying. And if it doesn't say how to put the data in, then you're allowed to do it anyway you want. It could be hard-coded, it could come from data files. And then the other half of that test 3 is going to be to find some routes and interact with the database. It may be a select, some kind of a select, show some data. We've just shown some data in tables. We've shown data in data tables. We've shown data in APIs. And then, of course, to get the data to show, you have to have some kind of select, but I'll probably keep it relatively simple. There may be an insert. There may be a delete. There may be an update. And the insert, we show different kinds of insert. Here's an insert if the table has no foreign keys. Here's the insert if the table has one foreign key. Here's the insert if it has like 2 foreign keys. So that's what you're expecting on this third test, but also what you have to do for your project. Just popped in. So you know what to expect. You know what's coming in this next, I don't know, week and a half of class and week of finals. And let me just remind you one more time. Final exam schedule. And we meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2. Classes that meet on Tuesday and Thursday at 2. The final is on Thursday. So I have Tuesday and Thursday at 9:30 and a Tuesday and Thursday at 2. So I have finals at 8 and at 12 on Thursday the 12th. So It'll be a fun day for me, maybe a fun day for you as well. I don't know. But so that's what's coming up. All right. So let's do this admittedly crappy update. And then for the lab, you're just adding some routes, just sort of, you'll add an update route, which is new, but you'll also add like an insert and just some more routes to get practice at adding these various kind of routes with interacting with the database in different ways. So you have more practice for that test 3. Okay. Oh, let me extract first. Okay. So for the second half of test 3, I will give you a bunch of stuff like this. I will give you the definition. So part 1, you're responsible for the definitions, and there is no Flask. It's all just about the SQL alchemy. In the second half of the test, I give you probably the definition and the load, and maybe I even give you a route and a form, and then maybe you have to supply some additional forms and routes. Okay. So one thing you have to know is how to get this in the right place. So I'm going to work in 341, in my SQL 2, in my virtual environment, and then I'm going to paste everything there. And then I'm going to open that code, open the folder, documents 341, SQL 2 virtual environment. Okay. It's important to realize that it's a lot easier. What you should do is open up the folder, not open up the file. Okay. So here's what I want. Okay. So what do we have? This is the planet. So that was a single table. So I have the define. Here is, that was 6 is commented out. 9 is what works. I have I am remembering the database in PlanetDB. I'm not going to do any careful security with threads, so keep my life simple. And I don't know if I've done anything with this database. I'm not seeing it here, so I'd better run my code for creating it. I'm not seeing a planet DB, so this is my define. In my define, I have an ID, a column, a distance, and a period. These were floats. The name was a string, and the ID was an integer primary key auto-incremented. I have a load where I'm reading a CSV file that I have. Again, I don't think I have this database, so I better load it up. So I'll run my load. Okay, so now I think I've loaded my planets. The IDs are auto-incrementing. I have a query at the end. So if I had already had this database and I ran it again, I'd probably have 18 planets. Okay, so there we go. Now I have a number of routes for this. And let me just remind you what we have and then focus on the new one. So I have a default route then I'm redirecting to the regular old table. Then I have the table, and I had a query at the top. So I'm querying, I import Flask because I have some forms, and I'm making routes, and I'm also connecting to the Flask form, the WTF. And I'm bringing in my definition file, I'm bringing in SQL Alchemy. And so now I am starting up a session so I can interact with my database, and I'm querying my database. So this query is not associated with any particular route. It's just something I do when I come to this page. So I have my default route, which is redirected to my planet table. Then on my planet table, I have this habit of defining the route and the function as the same, so that when I use a redirect, I don't really have to know whether it's the function or the route because I've named them the same. So that's just a trick to, have to know less. It's always nice to have to know less. We have to know so much. And that's why I let you always work from examples, because it's so hard to keep all this in your head, especially when you're working in, as you are and I am, in many different languages in our different courses. Okay. Then we had the data table, which was the HTML table with some JavaScript functionality added onto it using the jQuery library and the data table library. And that made the table searchable and sortable. We had a way to delete a planet. So we had a drop-down list. So there's a form for that. We go over to form planet. There was a delete table, which was mostly just a select, which is a drop down, and a submit button. And I'm getting the planets from a query. So I also have a query here. So there are a number of different places where I am querying the database and getting things. So I'm getting all of my planets in a query here, and I'm loading them up as the choices in a dropdown. So if you choose the delete form, you'll see a dropdown list of all the planets. And then we will have a submit button, and then we can delete a planet. So that one is an old thing. What else did we add? Here is us using what the drop-down list tells us is the ID of the planet that the user chose. So here I am querying the database and getting the record with that ID, and then I delete. I'm deleting that planet and committing it. And then I'm re-querying the data and sending it over to the data table. So that's an approach I can take when I have a small number of things like planets, so there were only 9. And so instead of having some form where I say, hey, this is what I deleted, I send you over to the data table to show them all, or at least in this case, all that's left. Okay. We saw an API route, and that just brought up JSON. So there was no HTML involved there. So there is no template involved, because you just, with an API, you just display the JSON format. It's possible in an API to display other formats. An older standard is XML, but the more modern standard is JSON. Then I showed you the improved data table we had queried. Instead of just doing a default select star query, we showed a query where we name the fields, and that produced different types for us. And one thing that happened is that we did not have this problem of when we just asked for everything, it generated some particular SQL alchemy field, which is sort of a behind the scenes thing, but it was there. And this is us. Here, someplace else we had to take it out, but here we don't have to take it out because we never had it in the first place. But there is some issues of casting. Some of our queries gave us a list of objects, and then we cast them sort of, I say, down to a dictionary. And then if you name the fields you want, you end up with tuples. And then I say that you cast up to a dictionary. So when I go over to my other page to display thing, I like dictionaries or a list of dictionaries, and the queries never give me dictionaries. The queries either give me objects or tuples, but I can get two dictionaries either way. All right, so that was my other query with a different query, a different query and a different data table. I showed in the data table where you could have a field but hide it and things like that. Okay, so that was all review. And now the new thing for the day is the update. So I'm going to pick a planet and then change some of the data in it and then have that data put over into the database. Okay, so I'm bringing in a form. So let me pop over to the forms. Here is my, again, crappy looking update. What do I need? I want to choose a planet to update. I am not going to change the IDs. There are things in the database. The IDs were generated with an auto increment. Then there's no reason for me to change an ID in a situation like that. So that's not going to be, they have to use an ID to say which planet is they are changing, but we are not going to allow the user to change the ID. So that's going to be a select field. And then just our usual different types of input. The string field, the name of the planet is just a string field. The distance and the planet period are decimal fields, because they were floats in the database, and then a submit button. We had one example where we were inserting, and we had, I think, a basketball player, and there the position of the basketball player came from a drop down. So we said, here are the positions you can have, and you can't have any other. And so we gave them in that insert a select field, a drop down. And we could do a similar thing here. We could say, we're saying here, there are number fields. I didn't do any additional stuff. I could have say like, oh, this has to be positive. Oh, this can't be more than 200, or I didn't do any of that, but I could. So I didn't do any validation, but I could do some validation. But I could also have fields like, say, the position of a basketball player, where I don't want them to just be able to type anything, but I want to control it. Okay, so right now, the only thing I'm controlling is the ID of the planet, which they're allowed to choose but not change. And then they can change the name, the distance, the period. They can change all that and click a button, which will cause that action. In the routes, so that's over in forms. That's the new part over in forms. What's the new part over in routes? Here's the new route. I call that form that I just made. And then if the form is submitted, I'm going to gather my information. So first I'm going to figure out which planet it is they wanted to change. So I am going to I'm getting the planet ID, getting the result from the dropdown, and I'm querying and getting that planet. And then I just have some printing to make sure I see what's going on behind the scenes. Do I have the right planet? And so that's just sort of debugging. So now I have the planet _2_update. That's I've chosen the planet I want to change. And then I have the name and the distance and the period. I have not done anything. That's why I say that this is a crappy update. I have not done anything to say this is the only field I want to change. Oh, I only want to change the name, but keep the distance and the period the same. I haven't done that. So that's going to make it a pretty crappy update. I'm going to have to change every field. I didn't load these boxes with when they chose a planet. I didn't load the boxes with this information, with the name, with the distance, with the period. I haven't done that. They will see the name of the planet in the dropdown because that's what the user sees in the dropdown, but they will have no way to know the distance or the period. So they're just going to have to type in something new. So that's why I'm telling you this is a crappy update. What I would like to do, what I prefer to do, is to display all the information, allow the user to very selectively change what fields they want to change, so they don't have to change them all, or and to see what data is already there in the database. So I'm not doing that. It's just pretty crappy. Pick a database. Pick an object and then tell me all the data all over again. Okay, but this is me updating. So I change this information on this one record, then I commit it. And then I'm requerying the database with all of the planets now, and then sending it over to the data table. So again, I'm going to show you, my response page is going to be a data table. I'm going to show you all the planets with that new planet. Sorry, it's not a new planet, but the changed planet, we should see the updates to it. Because I'm using the data table as the response, I only have one HTML associated with update. And that was here, planet update. And that just should have the basic fields, this weird little token thing we always have. Here's the dropdown, the planet ID, that's the dropdown list, the name of the planet, the distance of the planet, the period of the planet. So and then the submit button. So just our basic form from way back in the day, a Flask, gather the information you want. Okay, so this is the new thing and update, and I put it into I'm in the database layout, and I have a navigation, and I added the planet update to the navigation, so that so not only do I have access to that route, but I have an easy access to that route because it's in my navigation. Okay. So what am I going to do? I'm going to run it. And everything is old, but there it is, app planet routes. Flask run. Control click. Here is my default route was the table. So this is the table. We have the data table, which has the sorting and searching. Nothing has EE in it. Some things have an E in it. I have the delete. I can pick probably Pluto and delete it. I have the API. I lose my navigation when I go to the API because the navigation is part of HTML, and API doesn't have any HTML. It's just pure JSON, but I can go back. Then I have my other fancier data table where I've hidden the IDs and done something else other, but anyway, And then, oh, the data table 2 has a different layout because I did additional things in the layout of data table 2. So let me go back to delete. That has the layout that has update in it. Okay, so finally we're on update the new stuff. So what am I going to do? I'm going to use the drop down. I'm going to pick a planet. I'll pick Mars. And then I want to change the name, change the distance, change the period. So I don't know any of these things, so I'm going to make it, I'll just, I have some numbers floating around here, so I'll use them. And Mars is the war planet. There we go. So I grab Mars, I'm changing its name, changing its distance, I'm changing its period. I'm going to hit my update submit button. That takes, oh, that wasn't happening before. Damn. It worked in my office earlier in the day. Now I'll see if I know why. Didn't like 109. Doesn't like me getting the planet ID. I don't know why that's not working now. It worked before, but control. Just try it again. Go more straight to the update. Choose Mars. And there it is. So I don't know, maybe in my poking around, somehow something went wrong. I'll have to search, but the basics are working because now here is in the data table, the updated information for Mars. And then let me do what else in addition? Control Shift P to get my SQLite extension and look at the planet database and look at the planet table, right click, show table, and it's also the war planet. That information is there. So I chose, I chose Mars to have the same distance and period as Earth. So now this war planet is fighting with us for our position in the solar system. So there will be war. All right. So that is an update. It's a crappy update and it's crashed for some reason a second ago, which I have to look into. But let's see what you have to do. And basically it is as normal, do what I just did, but just for a different database. All right. So one of our first SQL Alchemy labs was this one table database of new wave songs that I just happen to have some data for. And you made the define the database and put some information into it. And then in lab 23, 2 labs ago, you're supposed to make an API for it. So you're supposed to have developed some routes. That an API doesn't require a form, it does require a route. And now this come back a third time to the same database. So the same definition, the same Flask, but now we're doing add a data table. So that's an additional route, but not any form. But then an insert. So that's a form and a route, and an update, and then in your layout, throw in some navigation. So basically take some of the routes. So I have this last planet example that has a bunch of different things. It has data tables, it has insert and delete and update, and you're just grabbing some of those features and adapting them to this song database. So can you just modify what you need to modify, keep what you need to keep, and make this work? And if you can do that, then you're well ready for the test. Questions? All right, I'm going to stop recording.